Good morning and welcome back to the channel. Previously, I spoke about the Sony Alpha 1 with respect to photography and compared it to my experience using the Fujifilm X-T4. Now, in case you haven't seen that video, I won't spoil the ending, but for this, I want to focus on these two cameras and their video functionality. Years ago, the Sony a7R III was my primary video solution that did most of the heavy lifting. And then this came into my life. The Fujifilm X-T3 offered amazing video features at a competitive price and would work with my suite of Fuji lenses. So I sold off my Sony solution and never looked back. In fact, I'd go on to add more Fuji cameras to flesh out my video production kit. But the team at Sony has really raised the bar with respect to video production through the releases of the Sony a7S III, FX6, FX3. And with the announcement of the Alpha 1, I had to find out just how good this camera is.
But God might be on vacation, and the promised land ain't never promised. My baby telling me to be patient, but the devil always working overnight, my darling.
Let's look at how the Alpha 1 compares to the X-T4 with respect to video functionality. The Alpha 1, as some of you may know, shoots 8K compared to the 4K on X-T4. 4K shooting on the Alpha 1 is also doubled to 120p versus the Fujifilm counterpart. Being able to really expand the ISO to get super clean footage, even as high as 12,800, is a huge benefit on the Alpha 1. You also get real-time face and eye detection that performs extremely well in varying conditions. For professionals, there's the option to use the full-size HDMI port to capture 16-bit raw footage into an external recorder. And while both cameras offer 10-bit 422, the Alpha 1 seemed to be able to shoot for much longer with better heat management. There was a lot that this camera brought to the table and raised the bar from what the X-T4 could do, but could it do it reliably? I took the Alpha 1 on a production with me, and while I felt like an overweight gymnast trying to leap on a pommel horse as I wrangled this menu system, it was definitely a lot easier because they brought over the new menu system that was ushered in by the a7S III. Once I had the camera set, I started shooting, and one thing I'll tell you, oversampled 4K footage is just so crisp and nice to work with. What I love is that you have a good amount of detail retention that cropping in on 4K footage doesn't feel like a major sacrifice. What's even more astonishing was the 4K 120p footage. It was not only great, but never resulted in the camera overheating. The X-T4, when shooting 4K 60p, would get a bit warm, and in some extreme situations, it would give me the temperature warning. But what if I bumped up the Alpha 1 to 8K? What would that do? Would it make it quit? Nope. Even when shooting 8K, this camera continued to work and didn't make any trade-offs. I'm not often impressed by cameras in the field anymore, but this was seriously impressive. And while many people will try and say you don't need 8K, sure, most people don't need 8K, but if you have the bandwidth, shooting 8K footage to better stabilize or recompose in post or find different shots, it really has its creative advantages that professionals will appreciate. Another thing I appreciated with the Sony Alpha 1 was the port options, and especially that full-size HDMI. I've mentioned this in my Fujifilm X-H2 wishlist video that I'd love to see full-size HDMI on future Fujifilm cameras because micro is just not reliable. When I switched to external monitoring, I never felt like the connection wasn't secure, and I imagine that this would invite better reliability over time. Now, this may make me sound like a massive hypocrite if you've seen the last video, but I like all the buttons and dials on the Alpha 1 for video. You see, when I'm looking at a photography tool, I want a clean, unobtrusive experience that brings me closer to the moment. I want to get it as right as possible in camera. With video though, I want something that has all the buttons and customizations that I can tweak to allow me to capture what I need for post. With photography, I want to be able to be as close to the final image as possible in the field, whereas with video, I want to capture the best ingredients that I can later breathe life into. And that difference invites a different style of shooting for me. I like that the Alpha 1 is overpopulated with buttons, and the custom menu options really give you a ton of granularity in which you can personalize this machine. It makes for a powerful video tool that may end up saving you a lot of time in the field as you look to lock the perfect exposure. Now, while S-Cinetone gets a lot of hype, it really didn't do much for me. Most of the time, I'm going to rely on S-Log2 or S-Log3 to get the best exposure. And if I want something more baked in for a faster turnaround, I just prefer Eterna on the Fujifilm solution. While it's less forgiving with highlights and shadows, it just handles skin tones much better, especially for those of us that are more chocolate in nature. So with all that said, who wins out? While the X-T4 has so much going for it, it's hard for me to believe that this is the better video production tool than the Alpha 1 in an objective way. After spending a good amount of time pushing it in the field, this camera hits it out of the park. What makes this even more impressive is the photography features are just as, if not more impressive, making this camera a Babe Ruth of mirrorless solutions. However, it's important to keep in mind that while the ceiling is higher on the Alpha 1, the difference in the field will be bottlenecked by your creativity and intimacy with lighting. The X-T4 is no slouch and has plenty to make a viable pro solution for many creators. You could also make the argument that for the price of a single Alpha 1 body, you could build a pro X-T4 video rig that would allow you to get up and running much sooner. So whether the Alpha 1 will be a viable solution for many creators, that's something I have a hard time believing. All I can say is that I'm really glad companies like Sony are continuing to raise the bar in this space. It means that consumers will ultimately win as brands compete for our wallets. And there you have it, my comparison with the Alpha 1 and X-T4. If you haven't already, check out my photography comparison because the results there were really interesting. Some of you may be wondering if this content is hinting at me ditching Fujifilm. Well, I don't think that's possible, especially right now. This provides a lot of value for me, especially when I'm looking to produce videos very quickly. However, I am in the market for a cinema solution this year, and at some point, I'll have to add something to the kit that'll truly level up our offerings. And well, even I don't know what camera that's gonna be. In any case, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you know when that happens and we can dialogue about it in the comments below. As always, my name's Gadgen. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.